Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March meeting of the Housing Management Board. I'm the independent chair of this body. I'm Alex Marsh, and I'm Professor of Public Policy at the University of Bristol. Just to remind everybody in the meeting, firstly, welcome everybody, some new faces, and we'll go around the room and introduce ourselves in a moment. Just as a quick reminder, as we know, this meeting is being broadcast live. It is also subject to the Standard Council sort of code of conduct. So questions through the chair if possible, or I realise if we've got people struggling with their internet connection, it might be through the chat, and I'll offer them to the meeting as appropriate. Hopefully we can keep our conversation on target and on focus in terms of the agenda. So I suggest we go around the room in the order that I can see you. So just to introduce very briefly, I've got top left, Councillor Bolton.
Yeah, hello, my name's Charlie Bolton, Green Party Councillor for Southall. For another 6 weeks, then I'll stop.
And then I've got Peter Edwards.
Hello, I'm Peter Edwards, I'm a tenant, and I'm also on the scrutiny panel.
Thank you, Peter. I've got going by the name of tenant participation.
Oh, sorry. Hi, Liz Cheetham. I'm engagement team leader.
And I've got Sarah.
Hello, I'm Sarah Spicer, Business Innovation Manager in Housing and Landlord Services.
And Zara? Your sound's gone, Zara.
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay, sorry, right. I'm head of service for responsive repairs within the housing services team, Zara Naylor.
Thank you. Next, I've got Philip. Philip, if I introduce your tenant representative on this committee, just in case I think your sound is struggling a little bit. I've got Steve Gregory. Your sound's off, Steve. Still off?
Put your microphone on, Steve.
Sorry, I kept clicking, it wouldn't go off. Sorry. My name's Steve Gregory. I work for the Democratic Services Team, Bristol City Council.
Thank you. Sarah Hooper.
I'm Sarah Hooper, Accessible Homes and Tech Hub Manager, Bristol City Council.
Thank you very much. Councillor Sargent.
Hi, I'm Jo Sargent. I'm councillor for Avonmouth and Lawrence Western Ward.
Thanks very much. Kerry Bales.
Hello, I'm Kerry Bales. I'm Area 6 tenant rep.
Thanks very much. Tom Gilchrist.
Hello there, I'm Tom Gilchrist. I'm the Private Housing and Accessible Homes Manager, and I manage a range of services, including the Accessible Homes team that Sarah manages on my behalf.
That's great, thank you. Kirsty Hammond.
Hi, I'm Kirsty Hammond. I work for Heart of the S13, a local charity in Hartford. I'm also a social tenant, and I'm their climate action development practitioner. Sorry, I'm on my phone and the front camera doesn't work, so I'm trying to put a background picture up. My camera will be off.
Don't worry, that's great. Thanks. Christine.
Hello, it's Christine Jory, tenant rep, live in Redfield.
Thanks very much, Christine. Fiona Lester. You've got no sound, unfortunately.
Hear me? Oh goodness.
Ah, now you are. Yes, you were there.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yes, so I'll say that again. So it's Fiona Lester, Head of Housing and Estates for Landlord Services.
Cheers, thank you. And Councillor Goggin, who may or may not be on mute.
Apologies, yeah, I'm having problems with the technology as well. Yeah, Councillor Goggin, I'm a councillor for Hartcliffe and Withywood, and I'm a council tenant in Philwood.
Thanks very much. Thanks, everybody. I'm sure we'll all have just about mastered the technology at the point where we hopefully don't need it any longer. So, or not for this sort of meeting anyway. Right, welcome everybody, and great for you all to be here. And some people I've met in other contexts, but it's good to have you as part of the Housing Management Board meeting for today. So just to move on to item 2, which is minutes of the previous meeting. So for those of you that were there, we met on December the 10th. And just running through, anybody who was there, is anything that anybody wants to query in terms of the record and accuracy? If not, there were a couple of actions. If we come down to item 4, scroll near the bottom of that, we've got an action on the Business Innovation Manager, suggested that the pilot consider 2 locations better to capture diversity. That's something to do with moving forward together, isn't it, Sarah? And pick up on that later on.
We will do. We've got a moving forward together update later.
Absolutely. So we'll pick up on that as we get through the agenda. And then moving down further, we've got a couple of things for note, but there is an action on the Service Manager Responsive Repairs under 7, COVID-19 update.
Yep.
And that was to do with curbs, I believe.
Internet problems. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Sorry. The action is the vehicle on the pavement action.
Yeah.
Yes, that was responded to. A direct contact made with Phil. If Phil is on the line, then he will be able to confirm that I made direct contact with him, and there is a record of my contact.
Okay. So, and this is agreed to communicate with all staff contractors explicitly. So this is, I think, there's a broader point, isn't there, about mobility and parking on drop curbs?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, we unfortunately do get occasions when we need to send reminders. People do know it is against the law, but we do send reminders and we do act upon information received.
Good. Good, thank you. So the only other thing I'd like to pick up, just under 9, any other business, there was a procedural question about the distribution of minutes to the forums. I just want to check that's either happened or still in hand.
Yes, Chair, I did send the draft minutes around in time. Yes, yep. That's done, and that will continue in the future. Okay.
Fine. Well, that's great. Cheers.
Thank you.
I think that was for the benefit of our tenant representatives and sharing our discussions. So that's great. And Phil's just confirmed Zara's point. So thanks for that, Phil. So item 3, public forum. I think we mentioned earlier there weren't any questions in advance or petitions to deal with for this meeting. So I think we maybe.
That's correct, Chair.
Yeah, fantastic. So we move on to item 4, accessible homes. Who'd like to pick up on this and say a few words about this?
Well, do you want me very quickly, Chair, to run through the paper, just picking out the salient points before we open up for questions?
I think just the highlights would be great. Yes.
Okay, that's fine. This report outlines the team known as Accessible Homes, and Accessible Homes, although it sits within Housing and Landlord Services, it actually is a team that covers staff or contains staff that work both in adult care and support and housing related staff. And it is in effect the single point of contact for anybody who is looking for an aid, an adaptation or a technology enabled care assessment to be undertaken in their own homes. The funding for it comes through a number of different work streams, both from the general fund, the HRA, but also through some capitalising of costs from the disabled facility grants, which are given to homeowners to improve and install aids and adaptations in the property. The reality is, I think the team is a big team. You know, there are nearly 40 staff in there when it's fully staffed. But obviously, as you can imagine, during the last year, it has been an enormous challenge to deliver the broad range of works that the team do to a range of individuals, the majority of whom, because of the client group that we deal with, who have either been shielding, who have been basically not wanting contractors in their own homes, or have been reluctant to let assessments to be undertaken to themselves. And understandably, as a result of all of that, There has been some challenges that the team has faced over the last 12 months to deliver aids and adaptations to the same level that we were delivering some years ago. And some years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, we were delivering adaptations within a few weeks. The delays this year has caused us enormous problems, which has been compounded not just by the COVID pandemic, but also in relation to issues we've had with contractors furloughing staff, not bringing them back until the end of August. We've had contractors even then still not delivering. So we've had a whole range of issues that we have had to struggle with. But what I can quite confidently say, Chair, is that through all of that problem, and undoubtedly there have been issues in us speedily delivering aids and adaptations to some of our most vulnerable residents in the city, the service has fully committed all of its budget as of the end of January. So although we've got delays, we have fully committed all of our budgets. So there's no, we wouldn't have had any more money to spend and assist any more people even if we wanted to do so. But allocating of work is really quite difficult in these really challenging times. And we do tend to prioritise people who are in hospital, who need discharge, who are in critical need. And when I say critical need, where they are deemed to be a high priority by adult care and support. So where it comes through, all of our assessments come through Care Direct, which is the point of contact for adult care. And they do a prioritisation assessment at that point. And if they are saying somebody is a high priority, we will ensure that they have their assessment and the work undertaken without delays. But obviously with contractors being on furlough, we've had to prioritise certain works to get them done, and undoubtedly that has caused us some issues. As I said, towards the end of the report, we do outline some actions that this team are currently working through at the moment around filling a number of the vacancies that we have. We're just actually in the process of going into a new framework contract, which will start early in the new financial year, April, early May, which will bring forward through a Southwest procurement contract, new contractors who actually are dedicated to doing and delivering aids and adaptations. And we've been trialling using them since Christmas to deliver some of our works. And the feedback that we've had both from our own staff, but from clients have been really, really, really positive. We've also, and just to say, because of the pressures that the national government have, in December, we were given another £500,000 by central government on the DFG so that's for homeowners to deliver aids and adaptations with a priority to continue to get people out of hospital. So what I'm trying to describe is we have a service that's getting enormous demands on it. We've got a lot of residents that want stuff done, but actually are reluctant to be assessed or have people in their homes because of their particular circumstances and because of the pandemic. But also we have a range of priorities that are pulling the team around. And undoubtedly that has resulted in a number of delays to the work that we usually do really quickly. So that's a very simple summary. Obviously we are open for questions if any of the other attendees want to ask us.
Thanks, Tom. That's really helpful. Sarah, before I ask for questions, Sarah, is there anything you wanted to add to that? No. Okay. Thank you. Just one thing for the notes. I see Kirsty is now, your video has now been activated and bathed in orange. Could you just? I don't think everybody caught who you were. So could you introduce yourself again? Thanks.
Hi. So I'm Kirsty. I work for a local charity in Hartcliffe called Heart of BS13. I'm their climate action development practitioner. But I'm also a resident of Hartcliffe, well, Withywood, and I live in a council property.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. Thank you. Colleagues, so comments or questions to Tom and Sarah? Anybody like to pick up anything? Councillor Sargent.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the role of this team with regard to council tenants and other householders? Because you mention, I mean, in the report, it mentions that the team arrange and oversee the repair of adaptations for council properties. But then you mentioned also about additional money coming in from the government, which was to be spent for to help homeowners. So in terms of what the budget, putting aside that £500,000, is your budget spent on just on council housing, or it is also, yeah? So anyone can apply, presumably?
The budget is split. We have an allocation from the HRA for council homes, and we also have an allocation that comes through from the government for things known as disabled facilities grants, which are for homeowners and for RSL, housing association tenants, and for private tenants. So we work within those two budgets. They work separately because obviously the HRA is ring fence for council tenants, and the other budget is solely ring fence for non-council tenants, if I can say it simply as that. And in effect, what we've got is we've got the council tenant HRA budget. Actually, this year is overspent, so we're slightly over on that budget. So that's fully spent as of January. And the DFG, we've had an extra allocation. We would have been well overspent, but actually we're slightly short now just because of that additional allocation that the government gave us.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask another question? I suppose really what I'm trying to understand is if the budget, if we didn't have the situation with COVID where work, you know, there's been a backlog of work, or you haven't always had people available to do work, is that if we didn't have that, would we be in a situation where we didn't have enough money to do all the work that people are asking us to do?
It's a really interesting question, this. We, as a service, we're set up to operate across all tenures. And I think that's the important point. If you're a resident of the city and you want to have an aid, an adaptation, or a technology-enabled care assessment, we are the team to come to, and we're the team to deliver. So it's a single point, I'm the responsible, so when we have an issue, it comes to me to deal with. Whereas previously it used to be split across adult care, children's services, and housing, which was nonsense. So in relation to allocation of budgets, so I would suggest, I think Sarah will confirm, we've had over 20% increase in the number of referrals coming through across the entire group of work that we do, huge number of extra demands, and we believe that that's a result of a number of different issues at the moment. Well, not just recently, but that have been building over many years. You know, there's an aspiration by government, whether people are council tenants or private homeowners, rather than them moving into a care home or into hospital, there is an aspiration for quicker discharge from hospital back home, so people remain at home for longer. That, I think there is a general acceptance there is a better level of care, but also potentially a better level of outcomes for the individual by living at home. But what that has resulted in is more referrals coming in. You know, when the service was set up back in 2006, we were getting 200 or 300 referrals a year. As you can see from the numbers of adaptations done this year, it's over 1,000. You know, we're doing thousands of aids and adaptations every year, and that is just continuing to go up. So in answer to your question, I could say yes, more money would be welcome. Undoubtedly, I don't think anyone would say that. But I think that there's always a lead-in time for spending money, because obviously it's easy to spend. What we want to do is make sure we spend it well, get good value for it. And what we would be really reluctant to do is just to get a load of money and spend it badly and not get the outcomes that residents want. Because, you know, a lot of people come to us, a lot of residents, when they make the initial assessment, say, I want X. They want a shower or they want an extension. And I think the assessment process is really clear to be able to unpick actually what the real medical need is. And undoubtedly, that does occasionally result in some frustrations for some of the clients. They would like us to do a particular adaptation, And actually, for their own benefit, actually, it would be better for them to keep them walking up the stairs, but just to provide a handrail rather than installing a stair lift, or to get them going up the stairs to get to the toilet rather than installing an extension at the back. You know, it's a really difficult play. But, you know, if we built everyone an extension, everyone would be happy, but it cost cost an absolute fortune, if you know what I mean. So we've got to be really careful how we play it.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Thank you.
I would also just add that that whilst there's been delays in some works, other works have managed to go through. So we continue to issue stair lifts to stair lift contractors all the way through the lockdown, and they were, because it was seen as a sort of hospital sort of admission prevention sort of type of work, and all external works and those sorts of works we've kept on top on. So there's less weight for that sort of work than there is for the internal sort of works that we were struggling to do.
So just to say, Tom, I do believe that is a technical term that you just used. So I think most people would recognise it, especially in times of austerity.
Indeed. So, Kerry, you've got your hand up. Have you got a question?
Yes. With a certain amount of the population having some kind of disability, and even when you register on the Home Choice Housing Register, you would have to specify any kind of disabilities that you have. So my question is, why aren't councils and housing associations building pre-adapted housing? If you have on your register a certain amount of people needing those adapted properties, then surely it'd be more cost effective to pre-build them that way. And you know, the gateway offices on the edge of Hartcliffe, you know, how on earth would you adapt one of those for a person with disabilities? That would cost a small fortune. So why not pre-build them ready for them to just move straight into? It doesn't have to be specific adaptations. It could be something as simple as wider doorways.
You want me to answer that, Sarah?
If you want.
Well, to be fair, as you know, we at the council, the HRA is now building and has got quite a pipeline of new build developments coming through, and we're really fortunate that all of the proposed new build developments are coming to housing and landlord management team to review. And what we are insisting on, funny, we had one of these a couple of weeks ago, and we said those units need to be fully accessible. They need to be there's a term called lifetime homes. They have to be designed in such a way that they will be able to be used by any individual occupying them as they become less mobile, as their needs increase over their lifetimes, rather than them having to move. So we're doing stuff with the new builds. Zara and her team, in relation to relets, part again of the relet work, anything that's going to be relet, which is likely to be allocated to a disabled person, is been going into Sarah's team to ensure that work is done prior to being relet, so enable disabled people to access it and not have to live in it while all the adaptations are done. But undoubtedly, we have 28,000 council units already there. And I think the challenge that we've got as a city is, over the next probably 5 to 10 years, is making sure that those units over the next few years, we adapt as many of them as possible that would be used by people with disabilities. But you can obviously understand certain walk-up blocks of flats, there's no real sense in us adapting those, because people with disabilities with mobility problems probably won't want to live in them. We want to adapt properties where people can access them easily. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. But there's also a growing number of families with young children with disabilities. So you know, the chances are they're going to have to move anyway. So if they move into a pre-adapted council property or housing association property, then it's likely that they would never have to move again. So it's kind of future proofing their accessibility to housing.
Yeah.
We do. We have had lots of conversations with various teams around this, and it's the difficulty we sometimes have, especially for families, is where they want that housing, and they could be quite particular about where they want the housing. So we have thought about pre-adapting, larger properties and whatever, but we need to make sure that we've got the people to go into them. So sometimes that can be quite difficult. People often don't want to move out their area as well because they've got children in school. But we are talking with the team that is responsible for new builds and talking about making sure a proportion of them are more accessible. It's a good point.
Sarah, I think I've got Fiona. No? Did you had your hand up and you didn't, and then you didn't?
Well, I did put it up and then I didn't, but I was just going to say, I think you've got your point, Carrie, is an absolute key point. And I think in the council, we're doing what we can with the stock that we're developing and building in terms of ensuring that a percentage of them are adapted. But I know that other housing providers within the city also do the same. That's part of the work that has to be done in terms of looking at new builds. So some of them are built, adapted and to lifetime home standards. But what I would say is with adaptations, especially with particular individuals with particular needs, often what we find are they are very specific around that individual and that individual's needs, whether it be a young child and them needing a hoist or an adult needing a hoist, and where that's needed, how it's needed. So I think the point that you made around kind of wider doors, that some of those sorts of things are absolutely key, and that's the key sort of starting basis which we should be looking towards to providing. But the point is a really relevant one, so I just thought it was worth saying that.
Thank you. And I should just add that Philip's contribution through the chat was no complaints about the service personally, but then there is the issue about residents getting older and mobility issues. Why cannot all homes that house over 60s have priority for walk-in showers? Which is not quite the same point, but there's a point there about, rather than adaptations as such, thinking about properties being fit for. You mentioned lifetime homes. Aging in place is another piece of jargon, isn't it? About this ability to have properties that are flexible and allow you to stay living in the same place as lifestyle and mobility needs change. And I think there's an aspiration there, but the result, getting there from here, is work of decades probably, rather than months and years, isn't it? To deal with the whole stock. Okay.
Yeah. And the other thing I was going to say is, if you think of Bristol, Bristol has in the region of about 220,000 units, housing units in the city. And as you know, Bristol, because of its topography, everything's not flat. There's a lot of properties that, just because of where they are in the city, you've got to go up 3 or 4 steps to get to the front door. I think retrofitting a lot of units is really challenging. And I think, where Sarah and her team come across individuals who are desperate to stay locally because of their family connections, because of schooling or similar things, we try as best as we can through Homes Choice Bristol to encourage them to apply for a more accessible unit in that locality. But because of the limited stock that we've got, which is adapted, that can be a challenge.
Yes, absolutely. And just, I guess, to add in, Councillor Sargent's observation at MMC allows modern methods of construction. So one of the other things is, are there new ways of doing things that will allow us to get where we'd like to go sooner rather than later, which might well be relevant for some parts of the stock more than others, but nonetheless is something which there's a lot of attention on just at the minute, in terms of thinking about doing things differently by way of the sort of physical built form. Any other comments or questions in relation to that paper? It was a paper that the board asked for, and just to get an idea of what was happening in relation to adaptations. So thank you for the work put into to prepare the paper and share it with us. Anything else that anybody would like to pick up on at this point before we move on to the next item? No? Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So shall we move on to item 4? The Housing Management Board regular update on thanks very much, guys, on where we are with moving forwards together. Sarah, I hand it to you.
Yeah, you're right. That is me. Thank you just to Tom and Sarah
Indeed.
for presenting on that item. I do have a couple of slides. I'm not going to share them just because I'd really rather be able to see everybody and we can talk these through. They're quite short slides. Just as a recap, we have bought several items before regarding Housing Management Board, so you will be familiar with this. I won't go back over all of the ground, but it is our service transformation programme. And we started off by talking to residents and identifying residents' priorities and areas for improvement. And in December, we bought our plans, which were around having a new operating model, which means looking at changing the way that we work and piloting that in an area starting from spring of this year. And there have been two significant things that have meant we've had to rethink those plans. So the first one, everyone will be aware, lockdown 3 happens in January. One of our residents' priorities was around visible services and us being more visible. And obviously that's been very difficult to do whilst we're in lockdown and we are limiting our contact. And hopefully all board members will be aware of this. We did send an update, but our director, Julian Higson, left the organisation at the start of the year. And we are in the process of recruiting a new director. But I think between the pandemic and its impact and not having a director in place, this did not feel like the right time to be making changes to structures and trying to introduce local teams who could work locally. I would like to stress that this doesn't mean that moving forward together is ending. There is a lot of corporate sort of citywide support for this project and for the aims that we're trying to achieve in improving our services. It's supported by our cabinet member who covers housing, which is Councillor Godwin, who unfortunately couldn't be here this evening, by our executive director and by senior leadership across the City Council. So we're very, very committed to continuing to take action. So we want to make sure that everything we're doing is focusing on how we achieve those priorities that were identified by residents. So what we have spent the last couple of months doing is looking at what can we do in the current environment. And we will talk to you a little bit around some of the work that's going on. And this is why there are a few of us here today, because there are different things going on in different service areas. So I'm going to ask Fiona to talk a little bit around two of the things that we are looking at the moment. One of those is around making it easier for residents to access and get in contact with the housing management teams and their housing officers. So Fiona, can I pass to you for that?
Yeah, that's fine. So can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, so in terms of ease of contact, so one of the key things that residents told us was that they were really struggling to get hold of the service, get hold of their housing officers, and of course we recognise that can create lots of frustration for residents. So one of the things that we're working on is working with our frontline contact teams and my team, putting in place quite simple duty cover, but duty cover that enables us to have direct access with housing professionals. So it may not necessarily be your housing officer, but when a resident calls, rather than spending an awful lot of time being held on a call with a customer service officer, which is fine, I'm sure they're trying to do the best that they can do for the resident, but a resident wants to speak to a housing professional. So having the ability to contact, to be able to speak to a housing professional, the aim is for that to be a one and done. So that's something where we would speak to the resident and aim to resolve the situation, because as a housing officer, you're going to have all of the tools that you need to be able to deal with that situation. If it's a situation that requires a visit or contact with directly that individual's direct housing officer, the ability then for the call to be put through, it's a 2-day SLA, and the housing officer will respond directly to that individual. Some of this is IT related. So at the moment, we're just transitioning on into Windows 10, and that will enable us to be able to track those calls, put those calls through safely, and provide clean handovers, which is something we haven't been able to do previously. So the teams are really positive about that. They're really looking forward to be able to increase the way that they deliver their service. And one of the things that I want to do is, as part of that work, is setting up a system whereby we're measuring the ease of contact for residents. So we want to understand, you know, the effectiveness of the work that we're going to be doing over the coming months. So I've got a team of people working on that at the moment. For me, it's very much, I'm relatively new to Bristol City Council. For me, it's relatively a quick win. It should be something that's within resource, it doesn't cost us any money, and it should definitely provide the kind of service that we want to offer for residents moving forward in terms of that ease of contact and being able to speak to a housing officer when you wish to speak to a housing officer. So that's some of the work that we're doing at the moment around that ease of contact. Willing to take any questions.
That's great, thanks. I'm going to take my life in my hands. Philip, are you, this is something which has exercised you in the past, and is that something you want to pick up on at that point?
Can you hear me?
Just about. Oh, almost.
All right, I think I might have fixed it. The little angels pull the wires on the speaker microphone thing. But yeah, what I would say is that you can't get, you're going to have to radicalize the housing officers, because our housing officer you can't contact on a Monday, Tuesday or Wednesday morning. She's only part-time. So either have 2 housing officers per complex or make them all full-time. Hope that makes sense.
It does. It absolutely makes sense. And that is why. So one of the questions that I would push back is, when sometimes you contact to speak to your housing officer, do you actually really need to speak to your housing officer or a housing officer? And that's the key. So if it's a general conversation about something, all of the housing officers have all of the same tools available to them. So more often than not, what's happened is, quite right, you're absolutely right. You would call, and if your housing officer works part-time, it almost feels like you get a bit of a part-time service because they can't contact you when they're not there. My challenge back to the team has been, actually, we are one team and we need to operate as such to the benefit of our residents, rather than it's not my case and so therefore I don't need to deal with it. I'm not saying that's what they've said, but I think that's the mindset. So I'm turning on that on its head to a degree and saying, actually, they're all of our residents. Okay, some of you will have a caseload with residents that are just yours, but they're all of our residents. When a resident phones in, we should be able to deal with that, resolve the problem, sort the thing out that they want us to sort out. If you really can't, then somebody else must pick it up. And the service level agreement that I am setting for them to do so is 2 days, whether your housing officer is in or not. So that's 2 days. So if, for instance, you phoned on a Monday and your housing officer wasn't going to be back until Thursday, so that would have been over 2 days, and you called and the duty officer was unable to deal with your inquiry, hopefully they should, but they were unable to deal with your inquiry, it will then go to a supervisor, and a supervisor needs to allocate that action to somebody who can deal with it, so that we are not having residents waiting a long time and being frustrated and often calling back. So what we found, I did some work just trying to understand the numbers of calls and the number of subsequent calls, and what we're finding is that residents are calling sometimes 3 times because they're waiting for a call back. Now, if we can deal with things at the point of contact when the resident calls in and we're able to resolve the problem, that deals with the frustration for the resident, and it reduces the amount of contact coming in to the office via phone call, which means that officers then have more time to be out on site and more visible, which is something, again, we've been told by residents is really important.
Philip, anything you'd like to come back on that, or was that fine?
Thank you. But you see, one of the problems we've got, I live in a complex. I call it a complex. There's 4 blocks of flats. And one of the problems we're trying to find out is, where is our EIB bids and we're supposed to be having our garden done under an NIB, but nobody knows anything about it. And trying to get hold of our housing officer, well, I can see a cloud in the sky, but I can't catch it.
Thank you. Right. So in terms of the EIB, NIB and that sort of work, I mean, I'm kind of moving on to another piece of work that we're working on at the moment, which is very much in its infancy, but there is a piece of work that I'm doing as well around how we grade our estates, the look and feel of them, the security of them. And some of that will be working with residents to do those things like the estate improvements and the grounds and the things that residents say are really important to us. That's very much linked to that more visibility. So what that piece of work is about is once we've graded the estate, and we're going to use pictures and things like that to, this is what excellent looks and feels like. This is what less, not so excellent might look and feel like. And the work is there then with those pictures, with residents and other stakeholders, to very easily think about what can we do to improve this estate, this block, this community environment, and bring it where it needs to be. But in terms of any bids that you have that haven't been acted upon, that should have been acted upon, if you put in the notes something, then I can pick this up for you outside of the meeting. I think that's appropriate to do. I'm more than happy to do that for you.
Okay, so we'll capture that one for action outside the meeting. So I've got a couple of further hands up. So I got Councillor Sargent first and then Kerry.
Okay, it's just really that I suppose the thing for me about the whole moving together project, it did feel somewhat over-engineered, and actually, you went from saying, oh, we're going to do all this and it's going to take this long and we're going to do this, that, it's going to have all these phases, and then it's gone. And so I kind of applaud Fiona. I applaud your kind of more sort of practical, let's just try and address some of the issues approach. And it seems to me the most important issue is making sure that people's problems are dealt with in a timely manner. And for me, as a ward councillor, it's not happening. There are problems with repairs and maintenance, and residents are struggling to get through to speak to whoever it is they're supposed to speak to. And I agree with what you said about it not having to be the same housing officer. But the point is that the team, that it needs to feel like it is a team and they're working together, and they need the support, and their morale needs to be looked at, and they need to be motivated to feel like they are a team. And because I've experienced this where people go off on sick for ages and then there's no one to deal with a problem and no one knows anything about it. That is incredibly frustrating when you don't know, when no one else seems to know what you're talking about. So, my feeling on this is that it's really important to empower and make sure that the existing staff are feeling, that this is not something they, I think there's a feeling they just think like they can't cope sometimes, and also just the simple things, if you phone up to chase up as a tenant, if you phone up to chase up a problem, someone should be able to just look at the system and say, okay, I haven't been dealing with this, but I can see this is what's happening. That is not coming across to me as something that is happening, because when I make inquiries, unless I'm lucky enough to speak to the same person, it's almost like you've got to start from square one. So it just seems to me that would be, and also with technology, we should be able to address a lot of problems without having to rely on face-to-face meetings. I know they're reassuring for some people, but most tenants' problems could be sorted out either over the phone or on a Skype or an email or something like that. And I think you should use more Skype and Zoom and things like that. That will actually mean you've got, people won't have to travel, and just make life a lot easier where you can do it.
Joe and Fiona, if you don't mind me coming in at this stage. Joe, I would agree. I think that we recognise there might have been a degree of over-engineering, and that thing around taking this back to basics is exactly where we're focused on at the moment as a team. We are looking at kind of, as you said, going back to basics. So we've got a training programme for next year. We're refocusing in on values and behaviours for staff, things like collaboration, ownership, the values and behaviours that sit at the heart of council, and making sure that everyone is aware of those. We're looking at options for customer service training. So really doing that thing that you said about taking it back to basics, and also reflecting on some of the feedback we had in December around the professionalisation of staff. So we're looking at training, we're looking at learning and development opportunities, we're looking at opportunities that exist already, things like the Stepping Up programme, which operates within the council, the opportunity for people to undertake apprenticeships, and really focusing in on getting the basics right. And I think you're right, that will make a difference to the service that people receive. Zara.
Can I just say that Fiona joined us in January, and a number of you tenants and reps around the Zoom meeting will know me and will know the history of working with me. Fiona is going to be a brilliant asset. She's going to be a brilliant collaborative partner for the repair service. Joe, I'm listening to what you're saying around our response to repairs. At the moment, we are only carrying out essential repairs, and that's because that's through government guidance right now. But together with Fiona, we will work to make sure that we are more joined up, that we are thinking between our teams and not thinking in a siloed mentality moving forward. One of the other things that I just wanted to identify within the repair service that we have introduced and we have seen a significant improvement in is, as a result of COVID, as a result of the health and safety and the concerns of both our operatives and the tenants and the residents that we're visiting, we have introduced phoning ahead of every appointment, phoning ahead of every visit, and that has proved really beneficial. That has meant that we have driven down the no access. That has meant that we've been able to get in first time. So we are trying to improve, and like you said, we are looking at the basics. We are looking at the things that we can introduce that people can visibly and tangibly feel with regards improvements to the service. The other thing to mention is that within the technical service, we have struggled to retain staff, and we have had a constant cycle of surveyors coming, being trained, and then leaving us, going on to new opportunities. What we are also doing within the service, and this is across the whole of the technical service, we're working with the surveyors right now in developing a career framework so that we can show a career path, so that people can see that they can move through different roles within the team, stay within the council, but learn, grow, and be able to ensure that that they've got more of a career. They can see more of a career path with regards to technical input into the service. So that is, alongside Fiona working with the front of house team, we're also working with our staff within the team around this career structure framework that we're looking to in place. If we can do this for the technical service, we believe that then we can move into the estate management service, and also where we have retention issues around housing officers, look to see that we can build them a performance platform, so that, and a career platform, so that it makes it easier, and it makes it, from our point of view, the cost of us needing to bring new people in all the time to recruit new people is quite excessive. So if we invest in our talent and grow our own talent, then that hopefully you'll also see improvements within the service.
Thank you. So we're getting some positive comments in the chat about that. Kerry, I realise you've been waiting for a while. Would you like to come in with your question or comment?
It's a comment really. With the Moving Forward Together programme, when it was first announced, I literally fist punched the air. I thought, what an amazing thing to happen to council housing services. To be honest, I've been a bit underwhelmed by it. The Cabinet made a really big decision to freeze rents for various reasons, and as council tenants, we weren't consulted on that. So myself as a council tenant, and I know some others, feel like our rights have been taken away. So as much as I think this is a brilliant idea, and we can blame COVID as much as we want, fair enough, that might have slowed things down a little bit. But, you know, we should be consulted on major decisions like that, and we weren't.
Anyone would like to respond to that one? Sarah?
Kerry, I mean, your comments are very noted at this stage, and anyone who saw the cabinet or the full council debates live streamed or on YouTube will realise that it was a very hotly debated topic, and that it was a decision that was not taken lightly by full council, and matters did come in for a vote, and as you said, was voted in favour of having the rent freeze. Your comments regarding consultation are noted. Legally, there isn't a duty to consult around that rent change. However, your comments are noted, and I will feed those back.
It's squarely in the area of some of the things that the regulator of social housing is interested in exploring, isn't it? The extent to which tenants are engaged as part of these things. You know, I've got Councillor Bolton, and then Zara, do you want to come back in?
Yeah.
I was going to ask a question back on the original thing. Is that all right?
Zara, did you want to just check? Zara, did you want to follow up on what Sarah was saying?
Yeah, no, I was only going to say that the other thing that from the conversation regarding Fiona's team is that we are already joining up through regular Zoom meetings and regular conversations across service areas. So we are seeing physical improvements in daily understanding of operational issues as well. So I just wanted to cover that off.
Okay, so I take Councillor Bolton next, and then I believe Kirsty has a hand up. So Councillor Bolton.
So it was from what Fiona was saying. I was getting the impression this is all something which is in progress but not finished as yet. So I suppose I was just asking, when could you come back to us and tell us we've done it, we made real progress?
So what I would say is, yeah, it's in progress. I haven't been here very long, but I've kind of, they've allowed me to kind of just get straight in. I've only been here 2 months, and I haven't actually met most people apart from via sort of Zoom. But yeah, so it's in progress at the moment. I've given them a deadline for the meetings and getting action done. To be absolutely honest, we can't firmly bring it in until we're all on Teams, because Teams is an enabler, because we can't physically hand calls over. So at the moment, if a call comes in via CSC, by our contact team, the contact team have advised me they're unable to actually put that resident through to the officer on the system that we have at the moment. But of course, once we're all on Windows 10, they'll be able to hand that call over. So my plan is to get everything set up. There's a rolling program for the delivery of Windows 10 at the moment. I'm not quite sure when it goes to the CSC team, but we can take an action today to make sure that we're able to feedback, you know, the details of when it will all be firmly delivered. But IT is the enabler to the final stage. But for me, I didn't want to just wait for that. There's all of the work that we can do to get everything planned, set up in the background, so that the day we can go live, we can start working in this way. That costs us nothing. The resource, the officers, everything's already there.
Okay. Right. The fact that your strategy relies on Teams brought me out in a sweat there, but never mind. That's a different matter. Now, Kirsty, strictly speaking, I'm not sure members of the committee can ask a question, but I'm happy for you to do so. So go ahead.
Okay, it was just to say that as a tenant, the inconsistency of surveyors in particular have caused quite a lot of issues, especially around communication, so that they don't, you know, tend to feedback, and then you are having to call up very many times to find out, and then you're starting from scratch again, and then you need another surveyor to come out. So do they communicate with the housing officers, or is that been because of not being able to keep hold of them? And then the other thing is, obviously with COVID, having your repairs cancelled, and obviously then the rent freeze, what's happened is those repairs have got worse. So, you know, a slip tile which would have been an easy fix has now led to a massive hole in my bedroom ceiling because of a leak. So then actually it will cost more in the long run to repair the damages, basically. And then also there's some pressure on residents then to pay for that separately, which could leave them in hardship. But if it's not classed as an emergency, but it could feel like an emergency to you, you know, if it is causing issue. And, you know, that ceiling, that's unsafe, but it's not classed as an emergency yet because you can't get that surveyor in. So I suppose my worry is that and also the communication, I had to ring up to go, okay, so schools are open now. So does that mean that we can have people come back in now and do the repairs? So there isn't any communication to say, you know, when the next lift of restrictions happened, the tenants didn't get a text or any information to say, I know that, you know, that correlated with that. So then you're just left there thinking, you know, when does that happen?
Okay.
Yeah, sorry.
No.
Yeah.
So there's some observations there. Well, the definition of an emergency, etc. Zara, did you want to come in and?
Yeah, of course. The issue over the consistency with surveyors is and has been a long-standing problem, and I would say that part of it has been because of the consistent turnover. Just this past 6 months, I have lost 6 surveyors from my service area. Now that's a quarter of my complement. So we are hoping that by presenting this career framework where people understand that there is opportunity by staying and growing and learning, that we provide more stability within the service. But that aside, no matter who visits a home, they should be making sure that they are communicating the outcomes, that they are communicating the actions. And that is unacceptable when you don't get that type of service. I
Honestly,
appreciate
when
that.
they say to you, a surveyor needs to come out, a part of my soul dies. And I think, oh, great. Yeah.
The other issue is that we are currently governed by corporate advice, public health advice, and government advice. And at the moment, we are being told to stay providing essential services only. That is what we have communicated on the website. That is what we communicated to residents when we know what their emails are. And when we know that we are going out of lockdown, we will get onto social media. We will get the information onto the website. We will let people know when they are able to book a repair. So you will get forewarning, advance warning that we will move in back into a normal environment. The one thing I would say about what is classed as an essential repair, you are exactly right. You know, if something starts as a drip and ends up as a flood, it does create more of a problem for us. There's no question of it. And it is a matter of judgment with regards to the person taking the phone call. They are expected to delve into the conversation to understand the extent of the problem. And if they don't understand it, they should seek advice so that we can give technical advice to confirm whether or not we should be visiting. Kirsty, you can leave your, you know, I can get hold of your address and we can look into that matter separately. But just to add that, we recognise that when we went into lockdown, we had a number of repairs that were already booked. Those repairs remain in abeyance, on hold, ready to book the appointments directly with the residents once we are able to reconvene normal service. And those jobs that we have that we cancelled because we went into lockdown, they will be our priority as we return to normal service.
Obviously, there's going to be a really big job list because you've then got the old repairs plus any new repairs plus an emergency repairs. Will you be having extra staff?
What we'll be doing is what we will be doing is we've already got external contractors lined up to support the recovery. So what we can't deliver in-house, we will seek to get support from external contractors. That in itself can create a small delay. But what we are saying is once we recover, once we go to normal service, we will contact those repairs that were reported in January. We will make sure that they are timetabled, and then we will open up new repair requests to future repairs that need to be reported. And that timetable will be advised on our website. We will send communications out in email, and we will also put it out on social media so that people get the knowledge, are informed that we will be back up to how we should be.
Okay, so there's some important points to process there. Thank you for that, and highlighting some issues that clearly are helpful intelligence about how things are panning out on the ground. So I've got Christine and then Councillor Sargent. Christine.
Hi, back in September, Zara, I reported that the downpipe outside my house had come adrift and was leaking last September. Had replied, this is a two-man job, screwing two parts of a pipe back together, and will be done in 10 days, not lockdown. They finally came mid-February. So I think you've got a big problem somewhere.
Okay, I'll put that up. I know where you live, and I'll pick that up and I'll investigate, and I will get back to you.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you for that contribution, Christine. Councillor Sargent.
Just about the definition of urgent repairs. I mean, I know we can be doing this to death, but I think there are some real issues of concern where you've got people who are stuck in their house because of lockdown, and so actually having damp, mold, leaks, bugs, whatever it is, that is a real, absolutely, is an impact on mental health. But it also affects causes respiratory problems as well. And young children can often be quite vulnerable. So I do feel quite concerned because I've got a lot of tenants in my ward that are living in really quite substandard accommodation. Put it this way, Acorn Tenants Union would be on the case if it was a private property. And sometimes you even think that the Bristol Post might be showing pictures of mushrooms and whatever it is else that's growing in the walls. And I do worry that that this lockdown, there's a sense the tenants do really feel like they're being ignored. And they're not getting their concerns dealt with, and there is a serious issue with mental health, both in terms of what they're having to deal with at home and also the fact that they don't feel like their voices are being heard. So it is actually quite a big concern, and I think it's something that this is what we need to be dealing with now, and getting it sorted out. Let's not wait for a kind of hopefully lockdown will be over soon, because we really don't know when lockdown's going to be over. Then it's a movable feast, isn't it? And not in a nice way.
We are not standing still with regards to reports of pest control issues, problems with severe damp, severe mold. We are going out, we are visiting, we are instructing contractors should we need to. So we are not completely on hold from the point of view of structural and internal repairs that are detrimental to someone's well-being and their everyday living. We are responding to those repairs. We have responded to those repairs, and I know that for a fact because I've been involved in conversations regarding them. So if you have a particular case, Joe, or if there is someone that's not being heard, please flag it to me and I will look into it.
That raises, that the issue of what housing standards might be acceptable in sort of normal life versus what housing standards are acceptable if you're living in the same place, 23 and a half hours a day or something, and everybody's at home all the time, is a question that's been raised much more broadly. The rethinking, and actually, if you think from my point of view, thinking longer term, it's raised some of the issues around the importance of housing. Actually, it's got housing a bit further up the agenda in terms of recognizing the significance that it has on life and health and well-being, mental well-being, physical well-being. It's sort of almost of necessity forced people to think a bit harder in policy terms, I think, about, and certainly in research terms, and demonstrating the effect of housing and the positive benefits and the negative consequences. All those things are higher up the agenda, I think, now than they've been for a while. Feels like we have to rediscover the lessons that were learned in 1918-19 after the First World War, when people realized that bad housing led to people being unhealthy. You need to do something about it. So there's a little bit of a rediscovery of that happening at the minute. Ross, good afternoon, good evening. You've joined us.
Yeah, sorry, I had it done at 7 o'clock in my diary for some reason. But...
No problem. Welcome, welcome. Sarah, I mean, we've talked a bit about repairs there. Are there other elements of moving together that you wanted to bring out at this stage?
No, thank you, Alex. If no one's got any other questions around moving forward together, I think we can move on to the next agenda item, which is an update about services under COVID-19, which we seem to have more than dipped a toe into already in terms of that conversation.
Indeed. So given that we've rehearsed some of those, who'd like to sort of elaborate on that and update us on how things have been going over this last lockdown period? Sorry, most recent lockdown period, perhaps. I shouldn't tempt fate, should I?
Fiona, did you have an update from a housing management perspective? Sorry, Paul, did I didn't. Did you have your hand up? Yeah.
Sorry.
No, I was just fingers crossed that it wasn't talking about the last lockdown. Sorry.
So in terms of recovery for my area of the service, so we continue, as you've heard, to deliver essential services. I just think there's something I think is really important to say, and that is that I think all of the comments that have been made today by councillors, residents, and you know, my fellow colleagues are really important. They're all you know, key statements. But I think it's also just worth remembering that the challenge for us is always to that balance between our employees and their safety and their concerns, and we are having a lot of that, and their mental health. You know, we're dealing with individuals who feel very affected and are concerned about the risks for them personally, and absolutely the need of our residents and for us to look after them during this really challenging time, who, as you quite rightly say, Councillor Sargent, are also facing really difficult situations where they are isolated, perhaps in a home that isn't to the standard that we all want it to be. So I think I just felt it was really important to say that I totally accept that, but we are constantly struggling with that balance. And Zara's team far more than any others, but my team, I would say as well, because I have the estates team have been feeling quite vulnerable, but most importantly, I've recognised that my caretakers have continued to offer a full service, and in fact have had to work, I'd say, harder during lockdown, because the need to make sure that our communal areas are clean and well looked after, where caretakers are operating, has been, I would say, intensified. So in terms of our recovery plans, we clearly have to act within the guidelines that we've given. We, as a cohort, have been doing lots of work planning what that might look and feel like as we release services. So for me, that's thinking about capturing where we are with things like our right to buy visits. Mutual exchange are a big issue for residents because, you know, they're not being able to move home, and that's an issue across the piece. And what we have done is we continue to carry out mutual exchanges where those exchanges are for essential issues. So it could be an individual suffering domestic abuse who needs to move, or an individual whose home is really overcrowded, or one way or the other. So we continue to prioritise and work on those. As we come out of lockdown, we will start to think about how we can start to increase our engagement and contact with our residents on a sort of face-to-face basis.
Thank you. Any comments or questions? Councillor Sargent, is your hand up at this point, or? Oh, sorry.
No, I think I forgot to lower it. Some people lower it for me and some people don't. Now, I've done it.
Okay, there we go. Right, there we go. Any comments or anything you'd like to pick up with Fiona about where the Councillor Bolton?
So is there a view about COVID that, I don't know, the vaccines or whatever fix it and it goes away and we carry on as normal? Or is there a view that actually COVID or something like it might be with us much, much longer term, and therefore there should be some taking into account of housing policies to take it into account? So I suppose I'm thinking blocks of flats and lifts and corridors, or things where high density or people being close spaces together. Should there be some sort of redesign or something? Is anybody considering that, or is that just not on the table?
Who would like to respond to that?
I'm happy to respond as best as I can at this stage. I think, Charlie, I think it's a very good point. I think we don't know at the moment. We are monitoring the situation in the same way that everyone is, to understand whether or not the vaccine situation will change things, and or whether or not this is something that's here for us here for a longer period of time. We don't know the answer to that. We will be monitoring it. We continue to look at public health advice, government advice. If this turns out to be something that's here to stay for a long time, I think then we would have to reevaluate and think about the questions that you've just raised. But at this stage, I don't think we feel in a position to be able to make that kind of decision. I don't think anyone does know what the long-term impact is at this stage.
Okay, no, so we're waiting and seeing. Fiona, and I've got Christine after that. Fiona.
What I would say actually in response to that kind of that statement and that thinking is, I think what we have recognised though is each time we've gone back into lockdown, the lessons that we learned from the lockdown previously meant that we managed far easier. And we, as a group of managers in HSLT, this was something we discussed when we went into the latest one. We transitioned into that very smoothly, and so did our frontline teams, because there's a learning. And we're taking that learning, you know, okay, we're going to approach it differently. Okay, we're going to do dynamic risk assessments when we go into residents' homes. So I think over time we're just we're getting more resilient, shall I say, and we're learning how to cope. But you're right. I think across the sector, actually, and all business sectors, we're all going to have to start thinking about, well, what if this is our new norm? And there'll be planning, and there'll be lessons learned from the work that we've been doing and the way we've been operating, and it will be a change, I think, in mindset for all of us, you know.
Interesting. It strikes me also in the broader context, there's currently a review of the HHSRS going on, which you might think sort of would factor in some consideration of risks to do with crowding and things of that. You know, potentially you might think, well, actually, if these types of airborne diseases are going to be a longer term consideration, what does that imply for how risks are assessed within the home, I guess? Potentially, Christine, and then Zara. Christine?
I'm surprised at how many people that are eligible for the vaccination have refused it, including someone I know who works in a care home and so on. And I think unless you have 100% vaccination, it's going to be here with us. COVID's going to be with us.
Well, I think we'll take that as a comment and a statement. Perhaps, I'm not sure. Yeah. We're able to do statement. A lot like that. Zara.
So with regards to the repair service and the recovery of the repair service, we are starting to do things differently, Joe. We have started where we are trying to trial, like Fiona mentioned, the mutual exchanges and the urgent mutual exchanges. We've done a few Skype videos around them, rather than actually carry out the home visit. We've done the visit through Skype. So we are looking at introducing technology. We are looking at introducing triaging of appointments rather than the need to physically visit the property when we re-establish. The technology is not there yet for people to be able to upload a photograph of their repair just looking at what you've put in the chat, Kirsty, that we just don't have the technology right now, but it is on the roadmap for what we want around the digital offer, and where you are able to report a repair, book an appointment. We want you to be able to upload your photos so that you can give us an idea of what your repair is. That is on the roadmap, but there is no time for that right now. But we are looking more closely at trying to diagnose via Zoom, via Skype, but via alternative means. We are doing that at present. With regards the recovery period, I explained earlier that we will be prioritizing the repairs we already know about. Then we will be releasing appointments so that people will be able to make new repair requests. As I said earlier, we'll be getting the contractors to support us so that there aren't significant delays once we get to a more normal environment with regards the capacity to be able to respond to the demand.
Anything that anybody would like to pick up on that? The question was, can videos or photos be emailed in if we haven't got any sort of mobile technology? So that's just a specific observation there.
Yes,
Is
yes,
that
they can. We do already receive photos. People have already sent photos into us when we've been corresponding. So we don't offer that as a service per se with regards to the offer, but when we're in conversation and when people are contacting us, we do already receive photographs regards their repairs requests, and we act upon them.
Okay. Anything else anybody would like to pick up on in relation to where we are with repairs? Councillor Sargent?
It was just more about that last comment about, I mean, I think sometimes there is a need to have a very fancy approach to reporting things when actually simple emails can often be the best way. And the only thing I was going to suggest was that as part of this sort of process of making it easier for people to avoid having to go somewhere or receive a visit, being able to go down, maybe not at the moment, being able to go down to your local community centre and use a computer in your local community centre with the help of, somebody in there to report something and to upload photographs, which are really important, aren't they? Or even do a Skype call is something that I know very, very many organisations that operate community centres would be happy to support. So I do think it's important, because I think sometimes I get the feeling that Bristol City Council, any customer facing teams do seem to make rods for their own backs by making things ultra difficult for themselves. And I don't mean anybody on the call. I just mean that, if you have a simple problem, you should be able to go about getting a solution for it in a simple way. So, and accept help where it's available. That's all.
Aspirationally, Joe, what I have asked for is an Amazon type repair service. So a picture of a property, someone can click on the picture, report the repair, book the appointment, track the appointment, cancel the appointment, change the appointment, and then we deliver on it. So we do want to offer a really simple self-service via the digital offer, and keep it simple, keep it straightforward, as an alternative to those that don't necessarily want that interaction, just want a quick online activity that they can deal with in a couple of minutes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments in relation to where we are in terms of COVID recovery when that gets going? No, it looks like everybody's made their contributions. In which case, we should move on to the last couple of items. So the next item is the date of the next meeting. Now, in our normal cycle, we would be meeting around about June. However, given we've got the election in the interim, and obviously there's the process underway of recruiting a new replacement for Julian, it would make sense probably to hold the meeting just a little bit, to push it back a little bit by a few weeks, maybe into July. to make sure that we've got the sort of senior representatives on both the political side and on the policy side in the room, or maybe we'll be in a room or on screen when we get there. So I think probably we're looking for the next date to be somewhere around about maybe mid-July-ish. I'm looking at Sarah. Would you agree? That seems about.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree. As you said, that with the elections, there's always a little bit of a period of adjustment following that. So mid-July will be a date that we'll aim towards, and we'll come back with some proposals a little bit closer to the time.
Okay, so in that case, we'll move on to any other business. I've got a couple of items already. So Kerry, did you want to raise something first?
Yes, just with the local area specific forums, obviously they're being held online as far as I know, and that it will continue to be like that way for however long. On Friday, I went to a Bristol Older People's Forum meeting, and there was a film shown on older people's views on council services and well, just views about being, you know, kind of left out of things like this. They can't access meetings, they're too far away, they're inaccessible, and they might not be able to get online. So how do we make them accessible to older people? Somebody suggested using common rooms in EPDs, but obviously you'd have to get the tenants and the residents' permission. You know, we don't want to impose ourselves on them, but to make them feel listened to and be part of this service, would that be an option? And if it's not an option, how else can we include older people?
Okay, so I mean that's a significant point. I don't know whether Liz wanted to pick up on that first.
Yes, I've got a couple of points. In the past, before COVID-19 started in March, we used to rotate our local housing forums in community venues, and we often held them in community rooms around the city, chosen by tenants, and that's what we've been doing since 2018. With regard to transitioning the forums online, we are aware that lots of people don't have access to the internet. So one of the things we've done is made a free dial-in option available. And we promote the forums in all of our sheltered schemes around the city as well by posters.
Okay, so there is action, but it's a point that we keep. I mean, we should.
Could I just point out?
Yeah.
Sorry, could I just point out we're not allowed to use our community rooms at the moment. Because of COVID.
Yeah, we're not holding any meetings in community rooms, Christine. We're not allowed to hold those face-to-face meetings. We've been holding forums online since March last year.
But it's a point well made in general terms about accessibility and inclusion for all the meetings. But clearly there is action, and I guess there's at some point when we move back out of this a reflection on effectiveness and actually whether or not you end up with hybrid things where some people are there online and some people are there in person, and and the logistics of attempting to do things which maximizes the ability of different people to attend.
I would just add it's really tricky at the moment, and obviously we do want to try and make the forums as accessible as possible, particularly during lockdown. And as I said, we are offering a free telephone dial-in option. So today people could similar. When we've held the forums, people could dial in using a telephone. They don't have to have the internet or access to the internet to be able to join a meeting. We've also been, for those people who want to try it, we've also held about 14 Zoom training sessions for our residents as well to help them to join meetings.
Do we have any sense of the use of that dial-in option?
Yes, we do. Peter, who's on the Housing Scrutiny Panel, they held their meeting yesterday, and about half the people who attend use the telephone dial-in option to join the meeting.
Okay. So,
Peter, do you want to add about this, how successful that is for the Scrutiny Panel?
You need to unmute yourself, Peter. Sorry. That's it.
Yeah, is that better? As far as scrutiny panel is concerned, we have about 5 people that are eligible for telephone calls. And the first time we tried it, we had about 2. But now, because it's explained to them and the numbers are sent to them regularly, we're getting about 6 or 7 people all on the phone. So it's working.
Okay.
But unfortunately, it's not on the forums yet.
Oh no, it is available for forums, Peter. If
Is
people,
it? Yeah.
Before my team do a ring around for anyone who's got access issues to offer them additional support, whether it's training or to show them how to dial in.
Yeah, it should be mentioned on the forums then, Liz.
It is sent out when we take the bookings.
Oh right.
So we should always be mindful, and as it sounds like we're always mindful of communication, whether it's getting to the people who need to hear it, and
That's right.
I'm sure people need to
bear
that in mind. But it sounds like there's your case, Peter, is encouraging in terms of take up. If people know it's there and know how to use it, then it is something which is it's not worth offering an option that nobody ever picks up on. So it sounds like if people get the message, then they engage through that, which would be useful.
And there's one in particular, I won't tell you his name, but he's well known for it, and even he manages it now.
All right. Thank you.
I think Liz is smiling. She knows what I mean.
Right. Well, we should take encouragement from that in the end. So I've got so Councillor Sargent, was that coming in on that one?
Yes, I was just going to pick up on what you said about hybrid meetings. That is something that I really think we need to try and do because, some people have got caring responsibilities, they can't leave the house, so actually Zoom's better for them, but other people prefer to, for whatever reason, to go to in-person meetings. The problem I've been told by the chief exec, Mike Jackson, is that they have been looking at this, but it is really quite a difficult technology and it's quite expensive. I think if people believe that it would be a good idea, then I think it's important that people express support for it, because it may well work out to be quite cost effective in the long run, because it will, if it increases people's ability to participate in all manner of public meetings, that's money well spent, I would say. But I think you just people need to make sure they say they want it. I don't want us to go back to loads of in-person meetings. It will make it much harder for me to attend, but I recognise that for other people, Zoom's not a great option. So yeah, special support.
So Councillor Bolton's just left us. Some conscious time. Thanks for that.
There's an option to have both, though, isn't there? So that you can have a meeting, and that meeting can be linked in with Zoom as well. So then people can be involved.
But I think it's certainly a technological possibility. I think the question of investigating it, the logistics of it, and seeing as we're in the process of discussing going on to hybrid lectures and things at the university, it's going to it's not filling us with joy at the logistical level, even if we can see the advantages of it. So other business. Christine, you've got your hand up. Was that a different comment to the one you made just now?
Yes, it is.
Please do.
I would like to know, how is it compatible with Bristol's ambitions for green credentials that letters from my landlord, Bristol City Council, to me as a tenant have a return address of Wakefield on the back?
Nice.
Does anyone know?
Presumably it's just a mailing service that the council uses. I don't know. I mean, it's an outsourcing thing, isn't it? Which I would agree with you is not great. And actually, it's probably just a way of saving money. But like you said, it's generating paper and it's generating miles, isn't it? Motorway miles.
It isn't a one-off. It isn't just to me, because I've had, several, but one is the account charges and rent increases. So that presumably has gone to every tenant of Bristol.
Okay,
Christine, are they all standard letters? They're not like personal that have been written especially to you. They're just letters.
That's what I mean. They're standard letters.
Yeah, it's outsourced.
So,
Yeah.
so that seems to me a question that's worth at least posing more broadly and minuting. If Bristol's, you know, proud of its green credentials and whatever, then is that?
I mean, it may be a click of the button to the outsourcing service, but if you've got physical paper that has to be driven back down into Bristol and around Bristol, it doesn't seem very good.
Yes, indeed. So it's a question to the system. You know, is this the most sustainable way that could be?
Thank you.
Could be delivered. I've got a question from Philip, also picking up on his AOB from last time. Philip, did you want to pick up on that?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, I just want to know what's happened regarding the housing policy. People on the sex offenders register being housed within 100 meters of a primary school, because as I've read it and as I've spoke to the police, no one on a sex offenders register should be within half a mile of a school, especially not on a route to school.
So from last time around, there was an update was to come to this meeting, wasn't it, Philip? So Fiona?
Yeah, so I would thank you. I was asked to look at this one, and obviously, whilst we can't discuss details of any specific case, clearly I can see that's not quite what you're asking. So I think I need to start by saying it's really important to just recognise that individuals that apply on the housing register, when you make an application on the housing register, it doesn't ask you to disclose any criminal record that you might have. So so that's the starting point that I think it's really important that you're aware of. The second thing that it's been told to me when I've checked through BCC is that if a known sex offender is about to be housed by Bristol, that the work that we do is that we will liaise with partner agencies and the police around the suitability of that property, and the ultimate decision will be made by the police. That's on every case. So if we know, that's the work that's done. And then the third thing that's really important to know is that if the sex offender is deemed high risk, they aren't able to bid themselves. That bid takes place on their behalf to ensure that the only properties that they are able to be offered is a house that's suitable and fit for purpose, or a property that's suitable and fit for purpose. So I can't discuss the details of that case, but those are the three circumstances by which individuals may well be housed. So, you know, in terms of any information that you may have had around that individual, I think it's difficult, and I'm unable to comment on that.
Can I come back?
Philip, yes, briefly.
Well, what I was going to say is I never named the person. I just named the fact that he lives within 100 yards of a primary school on Dean Lane.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I spoke to the lady who was involved in the chat and found out, she went to the council under Sarah's law. She went to the police, rather, under Sarah's law. A girl called Sarah Payne, who was murdered. And the police confirmed what the police lady told her. But the thing is that, as Fiona just said, if the council know he's a sex offender, they go to the police. Should it not be the other way around? That the police notify the council of all sex offenders or any new sex offenders coming on the list who they know are being released from prison and are knowing or maybe they've not been in prison, but they've been to court, and they knowing that that person needs housing, is going to apply for housing. If the onus is on the council, the council have got fewer officers. How do they know? Are you expecting the council housing officers to contact the police on every application? Because I've subsequently found out there's a rapist in Barton House, in Barton Hill, who is married with children. So you can't, you know, but he's quite close to Barton Hill Junior School. So the fact of the matter is, I don't expect the council to vet every applicant because it wouldn't take 9 weeks, it'd take 9 months to sort of check them all out. But the police should do it. And when I spoke to the police sergeant on the team, whatever they call themselves, sex offenders team or whatever, he said mine was the best suggestion. But he said at the moment, legislation doesn't allow them to. Well, I pointed out that the council and the police are both on the data protection, what do you call it? You know, you've signed up to data protection legislation laws. And according to the, and I've done a lot of research on this, according to the information commissioner in Wilmslow in Cheshire, the council and the police and the council can talk to one another about any issues regarding housing and housing, for want of a word, people on the sex. I'm not saying they're all child molesters, because some people get on the sex offenders register for downloading pictures. But anyone on the sex offenders register can be checked, or the police can tell the council, and the council can ask the police. But the fact of the matter is, I think the police aren't doing it because it's too much work for them. But it wouldn't be if they started it now, and everyone who went to court under the sex offenders register and got put on the sex offenders register was notified to the council. And if that sex offender is living at present within half a mile of a school, they should be told they've got to move, because that's one of the terms of the sex offenders register. You cannot associate with young children or children of whatever. So I rest my case. Thank you.
Thanks, Philip.
Sorry, there was just one other, I think Kirsty's popped something in the
mutual exchanges.
Yeah, mutual exchanges. So again, Kirsty, unless there are very few reasons why mutual exchanges are refused and they're not able to go ahead. It will be about the property size, too big, too small for the person they're swapping with, and it will also be around a court action. So if the organisation have taken action for outstanding rent arrears or ASB, and there's a court order, that's one of the other reasons. Other than that, there wouldn't be any. We wouldn't be able to stop a mutual exchange. So therefore, if it was known that there was a criminal activity, whatever that criminal activity may well be, and that was disclosed, it could be a reason for a mutual exchange not taking place. But there are two reasons, you know, it's the size and criminal, you know, whether there's a court
and
order.
rent arrears. So could it not go on? Could that not be something that when someone registers for housing or registers for an exchange that is listed, is there a reason why that question isn't asked if they're on the sex offenders register?
Okay, so you could ask it. If somebody was probably on the sex offenders register, I'm not sure that they would tell you the truth, but I'm sure there is a reason, and I'm going to be absolutely honest. That's not my area of specialism. We have a whole team that have given me the guidance in terms of the legislation that we act within. It's not uncommon. So as I say, where it's known to us, then different actions taken, then we absolutely will be very risk averse. And it's about, ultimately everyone has a right to be housed, and that's really important. And it's more important to know where people are than not to know where they are. So when it's disclosed to us, what we do is ensure that people are housed appropriately. But if what we don't know, we don't know. And unfortunately, people don't always tell the truth when they make applications for housing.
Thanks for that, Fiona. So there's something in what Philip said, maybe not about policy change, but there's something in there about variations in practice around the country, which I think in this, not sex offenders, but in terms of data protection and data sharing is one of those areas where it seems to me that different local authority areas and partners around the country end up ending up in very different positions about what they can and can't share for what sorts of purposes. And it feels like, without pursuing this any longer, because I'm conscious time moves on, it would be worth noting that as a general observation, that sometimes we are that there are barriers to certain sorts of action which are are successfully negotiated elsewhere. If you sort of mean, and so not Bristol necessarily, but you talk to council, say we couldn't possibly do this. This is against, it's against, and I've done field work talking to the local authorities 100 miles away. We'd say we do it all the time. We, from our point of view, this is sort of legally perfectly within the remit of our role. So there's something in there about variability of interpretation, if you like, between areas, which I think is what Philip was alluding to about the collaboration between the police and the local authority about whose data can be shared with whom for sort of what purpose. I think that was the point, wasn't it?
Yes.
Okay, well, so I think maybe it's worth I'm noting. I think that is a general observation which may apply in this case, and it might be worth just noting that, because sometimes we talk about constraints because it's a way of not changing.
Unrelated to the sex offenders register, can I just give you an example?
Very briefly, Philip, and then we'll be finishing.
Yeah.
So.
Gloucester City Council actually notified the local water authority and sewage authority when people move into their property. So the water authority and sewage authority, because they're different in Gloucester, they send a bill named to the person. Bristol, and I'm trying to think of what was the housing man called, first of all, the one who bought the Mercedes vans. I can't think of his name at the moment. But Bristol will not talk to Bristol Water or Wessex Water about who their tenants are. And according to Bristol Water, there's millions of pounds in Bristol unpaid in water rates and sewage rates because they don't know who the people are. And they're not allowed in law to turn the water off to a property that isn't paying the water rate.
Okay, so we'll just take that as a comment on the similar sort of point about information exchange. I'm not sure we can pursue it further today. It's a point to observe. Anybody else got any other business that we'd like to mention at this point before we draw the meeting to a close? If not, I'll say thank you very much for your contributions, everybody. Thank you for those who've sat in the background servicing the meeting as well. We will hopefully meet again in round about July time, and I'd say have fun in the meantime if that's not too frivolous a way to end a meeting. Have fun in the meantime.
Judge Speed's on in 10 minutes.
Oh right, excellent. Right.
Good night.
Cheers.
Night.